more like reasonable compared with the previous harsh control. So okay, so I brought up the World Cup as well as the COVID control. But right now, since Foxconn and yesterday we also know the Apple trying to outsource those uh, equipment or not equipment, sorry, the everything you can say outsourced to other countries like the memory chip to Samsung and Foxconn try to get uh, their assemblies to Vietnam and India. So maybe Thailand as well. That was in the news as well. So I just hope that everything in China will get back to like easier lifestyles in the after March, yeah, after the National Congress for Chinese government. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Howdy doody.
Outside.
Yeah,
Hello. You're back.
my
Everyone say Tyler.
howdy doody. Is my mic okay today?
Yes, it's working well.
Okay, good. So,
Okay, the last one on BBC is rare bomb attacks at Jerusalem bus stops kill teen.
oh, did you cover the protest at the Apple factory?
Yes, just
Yes.
finished.
Okay, cool. All right,
Mhm.
yeah, there you go.
Happy Thanksgiving, Tyler.
Oh yeah, tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Is it?
Right.
Yeah,
When you live outside the United States, you just really don't know, do you?
yeah.
But
You
you
don't. You really don't.
really you don't replace the turkey with chicken?
No. So the CNN headlines, it says deadly Russian strikes in Kyiv. 3 people dead and 6 injured following attacks targeting critical energy infrastructure,
Hmm.
and a gunman at Walmart and the explosion in Jerusalem. Same stuff. Okay, and then go to the tech news. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. As May said, happy Wednesday, November 23rd. Here we go. We're rushing up towards the end of the year here. So the top tech story today is from CoinDesk. It says that SBF claims that FTX had about 60 billion in collateral in the spring of 2022, so about 6 months ago, for a credit squeeze. Market sell-off and run on the bank reduced it to 9 billion and led to bankruptcy. Okay? Wall Street Journal says they have sources that Sequoia, who invested one of the investors in FTX, Sequoia apologized to its fund investors for the $150 million lost on its FTX bet and details plans to improve its due diligence process on new investments. And you know what? I'm going to applaud that.
Hey,
Yeah,
Tyler.
yeah.
I think that's kind of like what do you expect them to say? I just saw something really interesting yesterday,
I
both
don't
on.
expect I don't expect them to say anything because none of the other 30 investors are saying the same. And if I
Well,
was,
yeah. Well, they're the ones who are probably the most prominent investor. That's why they're, most people wouldn't even know the names of the other
they
ones.
I mean, I know I've dealt with them firsthand, and this is very much in line with their ethos and style and demeanor is very, very um, what's it's a very above board, very straightforward, and I no doubt they are embarrassed by this. And I love the idea that a VC fund is apologizing to its investors and and acknowledges a failure of due diligence, and they will have detailed plans to improve their due
So,
diligence.
so let's talk about the failure of due
I
diligence.
love
So this is what I saw yesterday.
Yeah,
The guy who is the head of the CME Group, which owns the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which
yeah,
is where they trade, options and commodities, and they kind of know that area. Um, he had testified to Congress at the same time that SBF did. I think it was this past March, and apparently, for the first time, he and SBF had a one-on-one meeting. And I don't want to incorrectly say what he said, but you can go look on the video because there's a video clip that's circulating not only on CNBC but TikTok and a bunch of other places. That basically he realized in a few minutes, he said that the whole thing was a fraud. Okay, based on the way that certain questions and answers that he got from SBF, and then I had heard that there was this congressman who gets too much publicity on television because he's a kind of a TV favorite, even though he doesn't really know very much. Named from Silicon Valley, named Ro Khanna, and they think, well, he's from Silicon Valley, he must know something. This guy doesn't I mean, I remember when he was answering questions about when on the GameStop thing, when GameStop happened, he doesn't even understand how margin works in brokerage accounts. This guy. Meanwhile, he's literally accusing this guy who's the chair. His name is Duffy, is his last name. Who's the chair of the CME group? He's basically accusing him of perjuring himself because and he's basically he was explaining why Sam had a proposal that he actually got some some legislators to propose, to like re-regulate, the area and to make, kind of be like regulatory light for the stuff he wanted to do, and he was going through it, and you got this congressman who doesn't really know very much, insisting that he knows more than this guy who's been in the business for 40 years, and then even has the audacity to accuse him of perjury, saying that his statement about his view of whether I think whether there would be a capital requirement or something like that under this proposal was wrong. And so you have to ask this question. I don't think Sequoia's money had gone in by March. Did Sequoia not watch that congressional hearing? I mean, the whole 3 hours is on tape. I was able to watch it. So, what kind of level of due diligence do you do? I mean, Sam's testifying before Congress, and then the other guy from the CME is testifying before Congress, basically saying none of this is right. And so what kind of due diligence did they do? And that's all I'm saying. I don't know.
Yeah, just Donna here. Hi, everyone. To follow up on that,
Hi,
the proposal.
Donna.
Hi. Sorry, I've been a little busy teaching, and reading all this blockchain stuff. So yeah, the proposal that Sam had put forth was a new way to regulate basically futures, in that there would be smart contracts and they'd be self-liquidating. Now that might work fine for let's say hypothetically for Bitcoin or something like that, which does trade on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange as a futures. But the uproar and the thing that Duffy was also worried about was if the CFTC was going to change this for something like crypto, they might change it for the farmers, and the farmers then would lose their ability to organize and kind of control in not in a negative way control, but control their hedges, which are fundamental to the agricultural business. So it was that this basic core component of the way in which futures work as a hedging mechanism, Duffy thought was under attack. And other people have now written that if this proposal had gone through, it would have been able to perpetuate this fraud for a very, very long time. In going this, so I think that there was some good regulatory stops, not but pressure was being applied vis-a-vis making rule changes that would have had to have gone through a lot of consultation and posting, etc.
Hey, Donna, can I ask a question? Is when they use the term self-liquidating, are they suggesting you wouldn't just be able to close out the contract? You'd have to end up like take delivery or something. What does that mean?
No, meaning that you wouldn't be able to post additional margin, so it would be in a smart contract. The way it works
Oh,
now
so you could.
is
I see what you said. Oh,
so he would
no,
he
that's
would
what
be your
I
he would
got it
be a
now.
self-clearing member from, let's just say he would be a clearing member that these smart contracts would self-liquidate.
So
Of course,
you wouldn't
now
be
what
able to meet a
happens
margin
is,
call.
yeah,
That's
well,
what.
so I'm Cargill and I'm the clearing member. I go to my big grain silo and I say, hey, you got to post a little margin, and they post the margin. Or otherwise, if they don't, then I liquidate them because I'm the one at risk. I'm a clearing member. So it works in this balance of what's going on in order to be able to guarantee the guarantee fund of the clearing association, which ironically is kind of what CZ's proposing. This liquidity fund is not dissimilar to the guarantee fund underpinning clearing associations, whether it be commodities or securities.
Okay, moving on. The next Associated Press, in a bankruptcy hearing, FTX lawyers say a substantial amount of assets have been stolen from accounts. Clients' names and addresses will be redacted for now. Bloomberg says they have sources that hundreds of Foxconn workers at the iPhone plant
Hey, Tyler,
passed.
real quick,
Yes, Robert.
back to that. You said number of assets stolen from accounts. Can you play that out a little bit for us?
Sure, we'll pin it. I will read it. Substantial amounts of assets has been stolen. Lawyers for FTX on Tuesday disclosed that a substantial amount of assets have been stolen from the accounts of the collapsed cryptocurrency exchange, diminishing the odds that its millions of investors will get their money back. The admission came during FTX's first court appearance since the company filed for bankruptcy protection on November 11th. Such hearings typically happen days after a filing, but this one was delayed because FTX's collapse came suddenly and management kept few, if any, records. Quote, this company was run by inexperienced, unsophisticated, and potentially personally compromised individuals, says a partner with a law firm hired by FTX's debt holders to navigate the company through bankruptcy. Quote, it is one of the most abrupt and difficult company collapses in the history of corporate America. FTX, short billions of dollars, sought bankruptcy protection after the exchange experienced the crypto equivalent of a bank run. The company estimates that there are more than 100,000 claims against it so far, and that number is likely to rise to above 1 million once the bankruptcy case is settled.
So I have two questions.
Ah,
Number one, and you or Ken or anybody. Number one, how did they pass a fucking audit? Number one, if even if they had one, and a good auditor would say, well, you need to implement some SOPs in here. And then number two, Ken, back to due diligence. How the hell does somebody opt to put in all the money that was put into this organization and they have shoddy SOPs? Was it
Well,
just a
Well,
FOMO
well,
investment?
if you read what the new CEO Ray, I think his last name is, who formerly was doing the Enron bankruptcy, he said that he had never heard of the FTX global auditor, and that the only thing that the guy has, basically to his credit, whether this is credit or not, is that he has an office in the metaverse. And so it wasn't exactly as if you had an auditor, which does circle back to your point as to if you're going to have all of these VCs invest, they should at least have a level of standard for the auditor and not some, strip mall person like Bernie Madoff had. I mean, that's basically what you had. Instead of at the office at the strip mall, you had it in the metaverse.
Metaverse auditors. Wow. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, for those of you, I don't, I think it's the last episode, the one that's still on there, because I think they'll probably drop another one this weekend. If it's not the last one, it's the one before. Of the I've mentioned this before in this room, the All In podcast. Tyler's friend Jason Kalkanis, and his friends do. Shamav, I mean, I know he's controversial with the SPACs, but he's a really smart guy. He has a tremendous understanding of markets, and he said that his people actually took a look at this thing because they were approached, okay, and he was suspicious of it, but he said, no, we did some work on it, and then we got back to them. We gave them a 2-page deck of, with like just really like, with a couple of suggestions, and one of the suggestions had to do some of these SOPs that you're talking about. They certain, like, put certain guardrails in, right? And basically, and I'm going to be very polite here, SBF or his people told Shamath and his people where they can go. Okay, that tells you a lot. Okay, so obviously he didn't put any money in.
Tyler,
yeah.
I pinned a segment on FTX by Temasek Holding because they also lost about 250 million, right down. So if you're interested, you can go through what they wrote. I think they
Somebody
also
else raised.
mentioned how they did due diligence, but apparently
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it was like
somebody else raised a point. I forgot what Sam was supposed to be worth, whatever number of billions that they claimed he was worth, personally, because of his ownership of this stuff, right? And somebody said, or he was liquid. Actually, I didn't say worth. That he was liquid this much money. So there, people were questioning, where does he get this much cash? Okay, was it 30 billion or whatever, or the entity? Where do you get this much cash? Because usually in a startup, you may get a valuation that's extraordinary, but it's all based on a valuation, based on multiples of revenue or something like that for a startup. No one's ever seen a startup that actually was able to generate 30 billion or something. I mean, the thing's only existed for a couple of years. That should have been another red flag. Just the supposed amount of cash that this thing was generating. Or he claimed maybe the Alameda piece was generating. I mean, it was just not believable.
Yeah, so Ken, I wanted to add also, there's some other interesting points that were brought up. I don't know if you saw that, was it, which fund again? Tiger Global spend $100 million a year on diligence. Um, and Ken, if you remember on the All In podcast a few episodes back, Chamath had also mentioned that it's very hard to scale venture capital. And 2019, 2020, 2021 were obviously very high watermark years of everyone going out there trying to invest globally, going big or go home. And yeah, corners get cut. People, you raise mega funds. You say, yeah, we'll just pay Bain to go out there and do the diligence for us. And yeah, we don't want to miss out. There's a FOMO effect as well. We'll all look back in those years and say that was definitely a crazy time for the era as far as investing valuations. And I, as a venture capitalist in Africa, I have seen these sort of founders. I'm dealing with one now who just hasn't got the memo that things are different. You can't. I asked him for financial statements. He hasn't sent anything in like 2 years. I asked, even just asking a question like, "Hey, how do I know these numbers are real?" You get this sort of response like, "Who are you? Like, you're just one investor. You're my first investor. You didn't write the biggest check. F off." And I'm like, okay, um, you know,
Thinking in the
we lost my
Matrix.
I
boss.
think he went
I
into
also
matrix or
have
Yeah, I
something.
think you went in the
I'll
matrix,
just
but
can
I
I just
think
say something
I
about
love the
Bain?
100 million that he referenced that this one organization's paying for due
Uh,
diligence, in-house due diligence, or however they do it. So that's just a
hey
reminder of the
Donna.
importance of that.
Just a reminder about Bain, please. Bain was the company that led in, I want to say it was 2018. I might be wrong. The $130 million investment into Basis. Remind you that the one of the people that was at Basis that lasted 4 months before they had to quote return the money because they didn't do the proper due diligence. That person that they invested in became one of the people in Terra Luna. So Bain's due diligence in, I can't say other areas, but in the crypto sphere has been less than stellar for sure. So, they blew it on the basis. They then, let the guy go and this quote PhD, he became one of the heads of Terra Luna. Then they did the due diligence here. Tiger should ask for their money back.
Okay, I just want to read this paragraph. The reason why
Sequoia has
I
apologized to all their
yeah, yeah,
limited
yeah, that was
partners.
the top headline. So Temasek Holding, the reason why I highlight them is because they are the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund. So they invested 210 million US dollar into FTX, and of course they have wrote it down. So it's written here: we conducted an extensive due diligence process on FTX, which took approximately 8 months from February to October 2021. During this period, we reviewed FTX audited financial statement, which show it is show it to be profitable. In addition, our due diligence efforts focus on the associated regulatory risk on crypto financial market service providers, particularly licensing and regulatory compliance, that is financial regulations, licensing, and AML, KYC, and cybersecurity. Advice for external legal and cybersecurity specialists in key jurisdictions was sought with legal and regulatory review done for the investment. Separately, we also gathered qualitative feedback on the company and management team based on interviews with people familiar with the company, including employees, industry participants, and other investors. Post-investment, we continue to engage management on business strategy and monitor performance. Yep, we recognize. Okay, yeah. So I think they did what they have to do based on those audited papers and stuff. So it was apparently profitable, but I think right now the problem is they transfer money from left pocket to right pocket.
Okay, moving right along. The Bloomberg says they have sources that hundreds of Foxconn workers at the iPhone plant clashed with security guards as protests erupted over unpaid wages and COVID-19 fears. That was one of the non-tech stories, believe it or not. That's a crossover story.
Yeah,
And
Tyler, I just want to supplement something. So originally we know, lately because of the COVID control, and mostly because of the lack of food and the harsh control. So a lot of people ran away. We know that, and then Foxconn tried to recruit new people or some retire, you can say veterans to go back, and again lack of food and the sanity problem, and they don't get the wage they were promised. So this time it originally just people ran away now, so it's getting serious. So all the workers don't want to bear it anymore. So this is a very serious protest. I think this will affect even more than the previous one on all this production for iPhones. So originally it's like we can't get it on Christmas. Right now maybe we can't get it on Chinese New Year as well.
But why is Foxconn not paying salary? Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, right?
Yeah, the and not salary, the bonus they promised. And originally they some of them are like uh sure how to say it, 外聘的，就 that is
Outsource.
yeah, outsourced human labors, outsourced labor is not their official employees. So they are like a very minimum basic wage than extra bonus. So right now they don't get the bonus because it's like a higher than the normal salary, normal wage. So so that is the no food and no money, and then protest. You can say it's a riot. It's yeah, serious than protest.
okay, next up. In a Q3 adversarial threat report, Meta attributes a pro-US campaign to US military-run phony Facebook accounts, pages, groups, and Instagram accounts. People associated with the US military were behind dozens of phony Facebook accounts, more than a dozen pages, a pair of groups, meaning two groups, and after researchers first exposed the decade-long operation in August, the Pentagon ordered a sweeping audit of how it conducts clandestine information warfare, the Washington Post reported in September. Tuesday's report is the latest evidence pointing up the finger at the U.S. military for its role in an operation that targeted audiences in the Middle East and Central Asia. I'm guessing Iran, because Iran's kind of on the border there. It's Middle East, but Central Asia is usually meant by like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. Um, Anyway, the operation was first revealed in August when researchers with the Stanford Internet Observatory and social media intelligence company Graphica published findings on what they called the most extensive case of covert pro-Western information ops on social media to be reviewed and analyzed by open source researchers to date. Meta confirmed at the time that the network originated in the US, while Twitter listed the presumptive countries of origin as the US and Great Britain. Quote, although the people behind this operation attempted to conceal their identities in coordination, our investigation found links to individuals associated with the US military, Meta wrote in its latest quarterly adversarial threat report, which the company publishes regularly to disclose its efforts in combating what it calls coordinated inauthentic behavior. The activity in question included several clusters of activity focused on Iran. Oh, wow, what a lucky guess. The Gulf, Central Asia, and Middle East and North Africa, Meta said in Tuesday's report. Typically, each cluster posted about particular themes, including sports and culture in a particular country, cooperation with the US, including military operation, and criticism of Iran, China, or Russia. Oh, wow. Iran, China, and Russia. Where have I heard those three names put together before? Is it just me, or was there a tech bro who came in here several times, like, I don't know, 50 fucking times over the past year, and said that what's really going on at the really big level is China and Russia and Iran trying to unite to form their own non-dollar denominated global currency, and that the US is in a full-on Cold War with them to prevent that from ever happening. And is going to pull out every punch it can. And oh, wasn't it a coincidence that Iran and China and Russia were all simultaneously having protests, and that all three, Iran, China, and Russia, are all saying that it's the US who's provoking them into these protests? So that's a little additional context that this article is probably not going to mention and may not even be aware of. But there are other puzzle pieces on the table that fit very conveniently. Not that, you know how sometimes when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, sometimes the piece fits, but it's not the actual correct connection. So who knows? Maybe it's a coincidence that these pieces kind of fit nicely. Call me crazy. But now we know that the U.S., when they do their own ops, what do they call? What does Facebook call it? Information ops. That's a perfect word for it. That they're specifically around narratives that involve Iran, China, and Russia, and that they're working to influence uh, minds on the topics of, and this doesn't help the conspiracy theories afoot that are accusing the U.S. of instigating the protests in Iran, which Iran is very strongly trying to point out. No doubt the U.S. will deny it, but this kind of adds credence to those conspiracy theories. Anyway, very interesting article. And by the way, not at all surprising. You should not in any way be surprised that the U.S. or any country is doing this. They are all doing this. So the question is, what narratives are they pushing when they do it? And it just so happens they're pushing a narrative that conveniently fits with the grand narrative that I've laid out, that the U.S. is covertly but diligently focused on as the preeminent issue of the moment, which is Iran, China, and Russia working together to get the U.S. Dollar as a reserve global currency status revoked and replaced with something else, which is a gun to the head of the U.S. More than any other. That is by far the biggest existential threat to the U.S. that anybody could ever conjure, and they are actively working on it. And so the U.S. is actively working to disarm it, and that can mean removing the leadership in those countries, which is currently happening. Oh, what an interesting coincidence. And wow, well, let's just open the history book here to the previous chapter. The last time this happened, well, let's see, that happened to be Libya with a Gaddafi. And what do you know, Joe? He got smoked. And the U.S. laughed about it when he did. None other than Hillary Clinton laughed in a TV interview saying, "We came, we saw, he died," when asked about Gaddafi's uh,
Yeah,
sudden
but
death.
Tyler, in Gaddafi's case, you have to put some blame on Gaddafi himself. Actions he took is why the U.S. intervened.
Yeah, I
And
remember when Reagan was trying to kill him back in the 80s.
I know, I
And
remember
we
that
did
too. And
actually get him in the
well,
end.
yeah, but then Russia. If Putin had not invaded Ukraine, he wouldn't have a
Fair enough.
problem. Nobody put a gun to his head and told him to invade Ukraine. The United States didn't conjure that up. I mean, so it's not a complete like U.S. manipulation. No, it's
Let me ask you this. I'm happy to debate this in a very, kind of rational way. To what degree, if any, do you think that the U.S. whispered in back? There's formal channels and there's back channels, and then it's a whole spectrum in between. So, intelligence agencies work in back channels. They rarely come out. They do from time to time. There's formal announcements made by different intelligence agencies all over the place. But more oftenly, the conversations are happening in back channels, and those conversations get, it's butterflies and tea leaves, but the messages get through to the intended audiences. And my point is that those are kind of quasi diplomatic channels of sending um, uh, subtle hints where I would love to see more about the degree to which Russia was hearing rumors or hints or implications that there's efforts afoot to bring Ukraine into either NATO or the EU.
Or
And
did
my
we
question,
get? Or were we? Did they hear it purposely or by
right?
accident? You know what I mean? It's like, did we set it up for them to hear it, or did they overhear
That's correct.
it?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. I don't want to project anything into that. I just would love to know, to what did Russia hear, regardless of where it's from. I would love to know what they heard, and I would love to know if and to what degree it's ever possible to know to what degree the U.S. was floating that sort of narrative, because none of us know, and I'm not going to pretend to know. But I imagine it's not difficult at all to imagine that the U.S. was floating those sort of things to drive one Vladimir Putin crazy out of his mind, um, and one and I'll concede full of up front. It's a thin but interesting anecdote that the U.S. sent cybersecurity. Kind of, we saw one article where the U.S. the month before Russia invaded sent cybersecurity experts to Ukraine to preemptively prepare them for Russian cyber attacks, which it seems strange because we shouldn't really care about Ukraine on that level necessarily. Um, and we were going around telling people, the U.S. prior to Russia attacking, the U.S. was rather vocal about saying that Russia's going to do this. We happen to know they're going to do this. Our intelligence agencies saying we're letting it leak out to be from behind the scenes to on stage that we're aware. We have indication. We're hearing our own signals that Russia is going to attack.
well, by the way, I mean, so Russia had set up medical tents with blood supplies on the border. So, I mean, they had taken their own actions to indicate that there's going to be a war, because that's why you would do something like that. But if I accept your premise, by the way, Tyler, just let's accept it. That basically you're
Sure.
suggesting the United States drew Russia off sides, to use a football analogy.
I,
Okay,
I love that analogy.
fine. So let's accept the premise. We weren't smart, the United States. We just got lucky. That was stupid. We put Europe in a war. We've created all sorts of dislocation on supply chains, inflation. 1 out of every 5 Ukrainians has been displaced from their home. There's no winners here. This is idiotic. Okay, the fact that the war's going better than people thought, and the Ukrainians are doing better, is freaking dumb luck. I mean, it's just it's not smart. So even if we accept your premise, don't give them credit for doing it because it's quite
No,
frankly idiotic.
I'm not thinking that he's giving credit. We're just having an open conversation of what ifs, right?
right.
And
I,
this
I'm,
stuff
I'm
has
not.
happened.
I'm not saying it was the smartest move possible. And I don't know what all the possible moves were, but I can see an argument for wanting to ensnare Putin into uh, a very long, drawn out conflict, which you might, many of you, I hope, hopefully do recall. I said if this happens, it's not going to end quickly. This is going to be very long and drawn out because the U.S. wants it to be, and that will be an indicator that that will be what a kind of a soft, and I'll even say feeble evidence that it is the U.S. that was behind this because we wanted this to be long and drawn out in this particular kind
But
of way.
I don't see how both have to be true. We
Sure.
can
Okay.
want the war to be long and drawn out and sap Russia's military and other power, but I don't see how we lured Putin into anything. I mean, if anything, the Ukrainians were pretending like the war was never going to happen up
Yeah.
until the night of the invasion. There were picnics and festivals going on in the
Yeah.
country. It's
Yeah.
completely unprepared or unanticipated. Everyone thought it was a bluff. So yeah, I mean, Putin owns this.
Okay. Int- uh, t- just to put a cherry on this little conversation, one thought, a little aperitif to kind of cleanse the palate and move on. Xi was just in Bangkok on Monday talking to the Southeast Asians about how don't fall for the trap of joining the Western new order of things because it leads to conflicts. And our style in, if you follow our kind of path, which is the China, Russia, what have you, uh, we're not trying to instigate conflicts. And he says rather pointedly, we read it yesterday, I believe, or the day before, his comments, which the headline says it took the crowd by storm. Rather strong words, that the Western side, if you join them, it's just going to lead to instability and lots of poking and prodding and conflicts and what have you. And that to me means my takeaway from that comment. One of my takeaways from that comment is he's pointing out, rightly or wrongly, he's just pointing out that he believes that somebody's doing a lot of poking and prodding that's leading to the conflicts that are now central stage at the moment. So um,
Because they
he
have the experience of always being poked. That's why.
Yeah.
anyway.
It was Pelosi's trip. It's
Poking the
all
panda, remember?
it's all begin from Pelosi's trip. And so, like during that time, China hosted several conversations. So U.S. including military, you can say collaboration or dialogue. But this time after G20, they started. I mean, both sides started slowly to start the dialogues again. But during this process, actually, China or CCP government has already you can say the strategy is like a 2 step forward, then 1 step backward. So they still gain something like this about the middle line, the central line of the Taiwan Strait thing, and how they can do their drills. Uh, or around Taiwan, you can say that. So even the dialogue starts again, but China has already gained something from last poke. You can say Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. But yeah, still we have to observe all the time to see how it is going. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the instigating headline here about the U.S.'s information ops behavior on social media, where they have accounts. The article continues. Here's an interesting bit. It says the people behind the network posed as locals in the countries they were targeting, like they're pretending to be Iranians, talking about politics in Iran on Facebook and on Twitter. Meta said some of which used profile photos likely generated using machine learning techniques. The operation does not appear to have been successful in spreading U.S. messaging. The August report from the Stanford Internet Observatory, which was based on data by Meta and Twitter, describes interconnected web of accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and 5 other social media platforms that use deceptive tactics that appear to cover a series of covert campaigns over a period of almost 5 years rather than one homogeneous operation. The Twitter activity included nearly 300,000 tweets by 146 accounts from March 2012 to February 2022. The Facebook activity included 39 profiles, 16 pages, 2 groups, and 26 Instagram accounts. And so the idea is that they create funnels of conversations where somebody makes a post and 10 people, agree, and they're trying to shift opinions and whatnot. And I think the big takeaway here is America got caught doing what you should have known they were doing, and more importantly, that every country's doing. And now it's more official. And so if you ever get yourself into that dinner party conversation, I think the article's still at the top of the room. It is. You can go ahead and pin that one so you can whip that out in that dinner party conversation and say, aha, here's the receipts. The U.S. does it too. And I take no pleasure in that. It's just an obvious fact that they, of course, were, as everybody does. But it's interesting to see when it gets brought out into the light. Things that are going on in the shadows. And we can't say the word no, a soft knowing. There's a soft sense of understanding that these things happen.
Intuition.
Intuition. I've strong intuition. There you go. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So the next is from Jeff Horowitz from the Wall Street Journal. And I remember that name. He was the dude who met with Frances Haugen to do the Facebook files. So he has a piece today that says Facebook's Q3 widely viewed content report. I know why he's interested in this. He's looking at Facebook puts out a quarterly report about what people are looking for and doing on Facebook. Yes. And he wants to know what people are looking at and doing on Facebook because he's going to find a way to make them look bad for what people are looking at on Facebook. In a first, none of the top 20 posts in all of Facebook broke platform rules. Sources detail Meta's latest fight against spammy content. And he took to Twitter to say, short version, Facebook's top content is no longer, by the company's own admission, 100% trashy. And I can almost hear him grinding his teeth as he concedes that. The next is from the New York Times. They say they've done analysis of the estimated 140,000 accounts paying for Twitter Blue. Many are far-right influencers. The average has 560 followers. Some are spoofs. And that's according to the New York Times. When Elon Musk bought Twitter last month, he made Twitter Blue a subscription service. And the New York Times is claiming they've done analysis. Something tells me it will be challenged and potentially debunked. New York Times hasn't been doing the most high-quality reporting as of late. And of the estimated 140,000 accounts, many are far-right. Well, right off the get-go, define many out of 140,000. Does that mean 100? 200? 400? What
Yeah, I
does
mean,
the word many mean?
what do they score them based on their tweets? I mean, how do you put
Great question.
a label on
Yes.
an account saying
Well, they look
it?
for the ones that say, I'm a far-right bigot in the bio.
But to be fair, even far left, I mean, any kind of labeling seems difficult in the best of times. I doubt Twitter's own data science team could even label all the accounts in that fashion.
Washington Post says over a third of Twitter's top 100 clients, including Mars, I guess the candy company, and Jeep, as well as 14 of the top 50, haven't advertised on Twitter in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know one of my clients, a big company called 3M, the medical industrial company, they've halted everything on Twitter. So I am hearing this anecdotally.
Washington Post says they have sources detail Elon Musk's rapid dismantling of Twitter's safety work, narrowing its scope to whatever he deems violent, threatening, dismantling the safety team. Oh, okay. So that he's now only focused on violence, uh, which is a much more narrower strike zone for what is deemed as violating of Twitter's safety policies or what have you.
That's still going to give them a problem with advertising when ads appear next to tweets that they don't want to be next to.
Yes, well, he is racing to get the app off of advertising for the at the moment. He has a mandate to make 50% of the revenue subscription, and over time, here's an interesting point that none of these journalists have shared, which they probably should if they're writing headlines about um, Twitter's advertisers. They should probably note that looking down the road at Twitter's roadmap in terms of the products and features that we've discussed here, that you've heard me pontificate on, it's not really an advertising based product roadmap. That when you get into e-commerce in the way that I've described, where everyone can sell anything they want to sell directly, and purchasing of each other's content of all types, of all medias, etc., and transferring of funds across uh, medias or internationally and everything else. There's so many different roads for Twitter to go in, but it's not necessarily. It's seemingly straying further and further away from its traditional source of revenue, which was advertising.
Yeah,
Right.
And
Doesn't he
but
need
Tyler,
to?
there's a cadence here. He's got debt service he's got to meet. So if he wanted to do that, the intelligent way to do it is actually see what the take up's going to be on these other
hello,
things like the subscription to have a revenue line in place to replace the advertising before you effectively kill off the advertising. Because if he's wrong on the subscription
yeah,
take
1 second, please.
ups, okay, and
Hold
the
on.
other stuff you're
Yeah, hold
talking
on
about
one
is going
second,
to
please.
take even longer, and all of a sudden he start loses the advertising revenue, he's going to default on his debt. Okay.
Ken,
Yeah.
I got to step out for 2 minutes, so if anyone can share their
Yeah,
perspective, that
no,
would be
I
nice.
totally agree, Ken. So how long
Sorry,
does
go
he
ahead.
have? Does he have a year? Does he have 3, 5? I
Well,
mean,
I
it's
think the subscription take up you'll see very
Yeah, for close.
soon or
but
not. Whether it's
it's
going to happen,
peanuts,
yes
right?
or
It's
no.
not in the it's not in the billion. It's
Tyler,
not a
Crowley,
billion
I'm the
dollars.
owner of
It's not.
Coconut Beach Bungalows.
I mean, we've seen
Is it
some
about
evidence, and they've
close?
already put subscriptions on hold.
Yeah, but
So
he's like he puts it on hold. He changes what
Right,
the,
and
the
she would
blue
like to
mark means. When he
cancel
figures out
without a
what he's going to
refund, right?
do, right? When he actually does it, because instead of okay, when he actually does it, see where he is in 6 months and what the take up of that
No,
stuff is.
I never. No, no,
Okay,
no,
because if it's
no,
not
no, no,
there,
no. Property
that
never
means
said
he's
to
not going to
cancel.
have a backup revenue source anytime soon where he can afford to lose the advertising revenue. That's all I'm saying.
what happens when he defaults on his debt
No, no,
payments? Is
no.
that
I
Chapter 11
called
or
about 30
what's
minutes
the
ago
deal?
to
Well, I
let
mean, yeah,
Booking
well,
know that the
there's
guest
two
was
ways of looking
trying
at
to
that.
cancel
He's going to lose control of the
but
company,
didn't know
whether it's
how
a
to.
Chapter 11 or not. I'm assuming that right now the debt is in concentrated hands.
There you go.
So typically, when it's in concentrated hands, the debt holders will get together themselves. I've been involved in these processes. Okay,
I know you.
they
Yep.
will they will go to
Okay.
well. Usually you go to the company, but I've never had to deal with someone like this guy, so that's a whole different issue. Okay, but but you would go to the company and you would propose what they call a prepackaged bankruptcy. Well, you know, if you well, actually, you wouldn't even probably even need to do a prepack because this concentration of debt is so concentrated. They would do an adequate restructuring. They said, we'll exchange our debt for equity. You're going to have to give up equity, and by
Okay.
the
Thank you.
way, you know, and they
Thank
won't
you.
take all
Have a
his
good night.
equity away because they want him to agree to
Thank you.
this deal, but they're going to dilute him, and then they're going to say, we want a new CEO and you're out, and that's the deal they're going to give him. If he refuses it, once he's in default, they could put the company in bankruptcy themselves. Any three creditors could put a company in bankruptcy if you're in default to those creditors. You don't need the company to file themselves. So that's probably what would happen if there was an actual default. And even probably before there was a default, when it looks like they're getting close to a default, those conversations would go on. You know, but
Someone must be monitoring, like, okay, this is his new burn rate, this is his revenue. They must have a timeline, right? Because
oh yeah,
you know, I wonder what that is. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it six
I have
weeks?
no, I don't know because I'm not involved with it, and I'm just watching as a spectator, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
but
But
it's not public, right? I mean, all this is
right,
private
right, right.
now.
It's not
So
public, but they know what the numbers were. I mean, you just took it over, right? So you know what the run rates were, right? And you know that he obviously reduced expenses significantly with all these layoffs. So you have to, you know, put some number on that, you know,
Mhm.
and probably he would probably provide those numbers to these creditors anyway. So I'm assuming he's improved the cash flow short term, meaning he hasn't. Most of his advertising revenue hasn't turned off. A couple of
right.
advertisers have pulled out, right? That's it. Um, you know, I think everyone's waiting. Okay, and right now his cash flow probably has improved dramatically for now.
Well, has it with all the severances and all the payments
Well,
and all that? I mean,
well,
that's not
I don't think
immediately.
I don't think yeah, but I don't think he's going to miss a debt payment because of severance. You know, this is where they're going to look at it on a run rate. You know, so you got to pay some severance. Um, and but you know what's the run rate? You know, this is where it is. Um, yeah.
And
So
if he let's just say they do default, there's bankruptcy. I mean, does that mean he's 100% he's out, or he still stays in there and runs the
well, no.
company?
So the way it works is, you know, generally the equity holder, in this case, it's him. Okay, and I think there's some. Isn't there some Saudi money in there too, or something?
Yeah,
They
there's all kinds of money,
yeah.
private
Okay, right.
equity. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Kingdom
okay.
holding.
So typically the equity holder gets wiped out and the creditors get the equity in the company. That's the simplest way. Now, or you could restructure the whole thing and, you know, but there's no reason for the creditors to do this. Okay? Sometimes you'll restructure it where um you know you issue new debt, you know, maybe you get like you know, depending on your different interest rates environment, you get different things. Maybe you get higher coupons, plus you get some equity. Maybe the equity holders, you know, get to keep something. I did a major reorganization of a major company once, where you know just to get the management to agree, even though the shareholders should have gotten nothing, I gave them warrants, okay, which actually ended up becoming worth something. So we created warrants for the common shareholders, so the common shareholders wouldn't be wiped out, because that was the only way we were going to get the board to agree to their creditors reorganization plan, and doing it without a contested bankruptcy. So it's kind of like a divorce, right? No, seriously,
I,
it's pending.
I just lost you there, but in any, I'm not a finance guy, but in any case, it's interesting that
It's no, it's just like basically having an amicable divorce. You know, you try to, you know, get everyone to agree on terms so it doesn't get dragged out for years. You know, that's the way you
yeah.
should do it. But with this guy, who knows? But
Well,
the
it's
other
also
thing,
interesting. I mean, he's the chief twit, right? So even if he's out, he's not really out. He's the biggest Twitter user,
well, that's
tweeter, and
well, yeah,
so how do
that,
how do you
that doesn't
decide?
matter. I'm talking about the equity. But by the way, but the reason I mentioned the Saudis, there is something called, it's very rarely used. There's something called the new equity exception to the bankruptcy code, where an existing equity holder, if they're willing to put up fresh money, let's say the company files, if they're willing to put up fresh money, could maintain an equity stake, and maybe, you know, or you know, this is where it is. So if he doesn't want to put up more money, probably he definitely doesn't. Given I don't think he wants to sell any more Tesla stock. But if the Saudis want to come in, that would be interesting, right? And say we'll put up the money to preserve our equity stake. They may not put up enough to get 100% because you have to come up with what is the company worth. Okay, once you figure out what the company's worth, you figure how much debt it could
Yeah.
actually sustain, right? So,
Yeah. And
but
but in no case does like all the I think does Twitter disappear? I mean, it's not like bankruptcy would turn the lights out or it would just
No, the
evaporate
creditors
over. I
have to
mean,
keep it running, by the way, because otherwise they're going to get wiped out. They have to have an operating company, otherwise they have no value. There's no hard assets here. This is not like, hey,
yeah.
we can sell off this factory. Oh, we own 500 acres of land we can sell. I mean, there's nothing to sell off that's a hard asset. There's no inventory to liquidate. There's no hard assets. So they have to keep this thing running, otherwise they have no value either. Even the most senior creditor would have no value if Twitter stopped operating indefinitely.
Fascinating.
So, Ken, there is one other angle on this. If Twitter was able to get more subscribers, wouldn't that have the advertisers come back?
Yeah, but advertisers are sometimes sensitized to what their brand is being affiliated with. I mean, look at advertisers that have pulled off Fox, even though Fox has great ratings, right? Okay, it's so every brand has to make its own decision. Okay, if there's real like kind of hateful stuff up there that doesn't cross in his mind the lines to violence or some other things that they're not comfortable with, they just may say we just don't want our brand there. We don't care what the number of advertisers are. I mean, you just have to look at the number of advertisers who pulled out of Tucker Carlson's show, which is one of the highest rated shows in prime time, like whatever you want to call it, news. It's not really news, but opinion. I mean, his ratings are better than a lot of the other Fox ratings, and they're better than anything on CNN or MSNBC. Yet advertisers pull out because they don't want to be affiliated with some of his stuff. So, yeah, it's not just about ratings.
I was talking about the advertisers. Would they come back if they have more registered users or paying customers in this case for Twitter? Because in this case, they're already on a platform. I know, like people who have been monitoring the water hose, they have been actually, or the fire hose, sorry, they've been mentioning that there's an increase in toxicity on whatever is going on Twitter right now. But they still, it's a lucrative opportunity to have if they manage to pull it off and get more people who are subscribed. Maybe this is something that will interest advertisers or a different kind of advertisers who are catering for people. Oh, these people can pay $8 a month. Maybe I can put some of my luxurious sort of brands over there because these people apparently can pay for something. Just put some tweets out there.
It's more interesting than that because this is why the product roadmap involves social commerce. Because once you introduce the Twitter traditionally up until now is very limited in scope in terms of the data set that the advertisers have access to. That people have some kind of very faint interest in rock climbing, very faint. Google has a far better proof that the person's interested in rock climbing because they took the time to type rock climbing into the search query. Where in Twitter, it's mostly based on accounts that they follow, and it's rather nebulous, and that's not as valuable to advertisers. However, with the product roadmap ahead, where people are buying and selling products and services of all kinds, now you have a data set that involves I want to target people who bought, tickets to this or this product or this service because I'm a competitor of that product or that service, and I want to advertise to my competitors' customers. And that becomes, very, very, very attractive to advertisers, and that's why Amazon's advertising has gone berserk in the past few quarters. kind of ramping up incredibly quickly to be almost as important as AWS at this point, and will continue to grow. Uh, Advertisers, that's the type of stuff that advertisers really, really, really like to. It's incredibly targeted. It's putting ads directly at the point of sale when they're about to purchase from a competitor. That's it's more about adding different layers of features into the product that will enable additional facets of data that they can advertise with, or to, or from, or around. That it's those extra dimensions of data that are going to be very important. That will be enabled by those additional facets of features that will be coming in the near future. It's not just about the user base growing. 250 million is not trivial. The data of those 250 currently is not of the highest quality from an advertiser perspective. So you can do brand campaigns, which are pay the lowest, but on a CPM basis. But once you start getting into very targeted cohorts, then you get a much higher cost per thousand CPMs of what people are willing to pay. So that's another reason to add those additional features and products to the roadmap. Amazon's Twitch. Oh no, there's one other from The Verge. They say they have sources that at an all hands meeting, Elon said Twitter's done with layoffs and actively recruiting for roles in engineering and sales, where they are now at 2,700 ish team members, which is about a third of where they were. Another one is that yes.
Now that Twitter is a private company belonging to Elon Musk, right? Does the U.S. government has a say of who he collaborate with? Like if he wants to collaborate with a company from another country, for example, Tencent or Alibaba?
You mean Twitter and Tencent?
Yeah. If they want collaboration, does U.S. have a say?
I think they would, in that exact case, they would probably go ahead with it and then wait for the U.S. to object, and
Okay.
they'd have to come up with a good reason why they can't.
Implement Richard.
Unless they're previously listed on some sort of ban list, which I'm not that I'm aware of. Huawei is on a ban list. There's lots of Chinese companies on a ban list. None that I can foresee a Twitter partnership with, though. New York Times says, since Musk's takeover, sources say Twitter has in some cases chosen not to pay vendors as it reviews and negotiates deals to cut expenses. Mr. Musk and his advisor are examining all types of expenses at Twitter. Some of the social media company's vendors have gotten stiffed. Oh, Jason Goldman took the themes to negotiating. Well, okay. Well, yes. When, despite Elon Musk's publicly distancing himself from SBF, text between them on May 5th show that SBF rolled over $100 million in Twitter stock during Musk's takeover, which Elon Musk says is false. And he says false. Business Insider is not a real publication. Just give up. He says. Amazon's Twitch makes changes to address child predation concerns, including mandatory phone verification and improving account termination for users under 13. Bloomberg says they have sources that Genesis Global has $2.8 billion in outstanding loans, including 30% of its lending made to related parties like its parent company DCG. Genesis could go boom. And Washington Post has done an interview with, I don't even know who that is, at DRIL. Who's that? She says is like a hybrid. I have no idea who that is. So I'm not sure why they did that interview with him. And Washington Post. New York Times says that New York becomes the first U.S. state to restrict crypto mining as the governor signs a bill imposing a 2-year moratorium on permits at fossil fuel plants. Wall Street Journal says HP plans to lay off 4,000 to 6,000 employees, or up to 10%. Wow, where have I heard those numbers before? So HP joins every other big tech company on the planet by cutting 10%. And just your daily reminder that Jeff Bezos said yesterday to everybody that you should probably not make any substantial purchases, high ticket item purchases in the foreseeable future in preparation for a very large depression. And mind you, that Amazon's data of the economy is probably the best in the world. They can foresee data trends related to the economy
Yeah, something
in a way.
like yeah, Amazon hires more PhD economists than any other company, so that's that'll give them an edge with respect to analysis with that respect.
But more importantly, as the world's biggest retailer, they have access to what people are buying, how their buying habits are changing in real fucking time. Something the government is trying to figure out, and the Fed tries to figure out when they make adjustments with interest rates. They're doing that based on incredibly nebulous notions of how people's habits are changing, their spending habits are changing, and whatnot. And Amazon's like, no, we have perfectly perfect data on this issue. We know exactly how it's changing by what micro percents in every direction, up, down, left, right, in every dimension. And so you have the big brainiac behind that company that has the biggest data trove of consumer financial transaction behavior data that has ever existed and will ever exist. And he's saying, you should probably not buy expensive items at this point because, oh, I don't know. And by the way, I've sold a lot of my stock. And all these companies are laying off 10%. Why are they all laying off 10% of their workforce? It's kind of a strange coincidence, is it not? In the past week, we've read, I don't know, 5 of them. Startups you might have heard of, like this Google and Facebooky and HP and Apple. These are startups I'm not familiar with, but maybe you are. And they're all laying off 10% in the same fucking week. How's that a coincidence?
You did call that 6 months ago.
How's that possible that they're all doing it at precisely the same week? I wonder if there's some external force afoot.
It's an excuse for everybody to do it.
Yeah, they have that too. They all have the green light to do that without getting hammered by the press and whatnot. I mean, you'll get a headline, but you can't hit them too hard when there's going to be another one tomorrow. So, yeah, hold on tight. Jeff Bezos is encouraging you to lay off on any high-ticket item purchases to last you through the recession. It's very sobering. It's unfortunate. I really wish this wasn't the case. Let's see.
Hey,
They
Tyler,
were,
really quick on this layoff thing that I was thinking about. The other day you were talking about, or the group was talking about Meta CEO apologizing for overhiring.
yeah,
And then we also touched on Google saying, hey, we got 10,000 underperformers we're going to let go.
right,
And it's kind of some jokes about, wow, well, not a positive joke, but about Meta CEOs making that comment of apology. Looking back
right.
on it, when I make a comparison of the two, I would rather be a laid off employee from
At
Facebook
Facebook.
where the CEO said I overhired than
My
be
fault.
a
My bad.
former employee of Google that said,
I'm
hey,
the weak.
I got rid of my weak people and now you're going to apply for a new job. So who do you
Yeah, good
think
luck
is
getting
more of a nicer person?
good luck getting a new job when you're one of the newly laid off Google team members who were branded as the weak links.
Weak link, and I mean, your marketplace that, let alone getting hired, even if you get hired, your marketplace value is like diminished, So that was pretty sad. That just shows you that though Zuck gets a lot of negative slams. There's some I think he should get credit for. I'm not a big apologist, but I thought that, and I've never seen a CEO do that before in my decades of doing this. I don't know if he really meant it, but even if he didn't mean it, it was probably the gift that'll keep on giving for a former Facebook worker versus a Google worker that's now going to be applying 10,000 of them. And if I looked at their resume and I'd be like, oh shit, well, you were part of that underperforming group. And I'd also hate to be one of the high performers that opted to leave Google at that same time and be clustered in with those who are labeled as underperforming.
Yeah, could I make some observations that having witnessed events like this in large corporate America, up close and personal, what happens in many institutions is they get bloated, they hang on to people who are underperforming. Economic times get bad. The board and the CEO say we need a haircut. Let's make it 10%. Um, and they tell all their mid-level managers, you identify the 10% that need to go based upon performance. What do the mid-level managers do? The obvious poor performers are the first to go. But then it gets really hard. And then what they do is they riff people they don't like. Um, and so there are people who are actually good performers who get cut in the urgent catch up of dealing with the bloat that companies have had. And so there are amongst this riff of 10% in all these companies, there are going to be some relatively new hires who are quite talented who were not popular with their manager and they got the axe because they said something their manager didn't like 3 months ago. And so while I agree wholeheartedly with the assessment that the risk is to get branded as one of those who was an underperformer, amongst them are many talented people. And that cannot possibly escape the lens of Elon Musk in terms of how he's going to rebuild Twitter to pick from among them people who are actually talented as opposed to underperforming.
John, I'll add to that probably all of those middle management people were the people that should have gone in the first place. I don't know if anyone's heard that TED talk
Very
that talks
true.
about
Very
them.
so
Very
true.
true. Yay.
100%. Those middle managers that riff people they don't like, that means they've been managing that way. And what they do is they take people they like and they promote them to higher levels of incompetence, a la the Peter principle. And then when the going gets rough, they riff good people and retain their over promoted friends. And oh my God, you hit that nail on the head. It is those very middle managers who manage up really well, manage down very poorly, who should be the first to go.
Where's that TED Talk, Jen?
Oh my God, I don't know. I think I heard it about 2 years ago, but it's God.
Well,
I'm
if you
sure you
can,
can Google for it. It's hilarious about middle
no, if
managers,
you can,
and it hits home. Yeah.
yeah, if you can stick in the back channel, it'd be great. Thank you. Well said, John.
Okay. On in 2022, that's this year, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Apple are on pace to take 68% of online ad revenue, essentially, to cut it short. Google Nest Wi-Fi Pro review, easy to use, inexpensive, no subscriptions, and nice design, but Ethernet limited to 1 gigabit per second, no assistant, and few parental options. The UK's National Audit Office says a 2% digital services tax on the gross revenue of Amazon, Apple, and other US giants reaped almost $360 million or pounds, because they're pretty much at parity at this point. in the first year. And Baidu executive downplays the impact of U.S. semiconductor restrictions after the company stockpiled parts and says its AI business would benefit long term. Yeah, right. Xiaomi reports Q3 revenue down about 10% year over year. And an interview with AMD CEO on catching up to Intel, etc. A look at 5G network challenges faced by telecom operators, including intense competition. And what else? A bunch of fundraisings. Shares of Paytm closed at all-time low. And Elizabeth Warren asked Fidelity to reconsider its upcoming Bitcoin 401k offerings. Meta's researchers detail a new AI trained to quote unquote human level performance in negotiation based strategy game called Diplomacy.
Hey, back to Warren's thing. Again, I think this is government overreach again. Companies can offer things. That doesn't mean the employees have to select it in their 401k options, you know?
True. Yep. Good point. So this seems really interesting here. This seems like our cup of tea right here. Here we go. Trying to pin it to the top of the room here. There we go. There it is. Here it comes. Bada boom, bada bing. Meta's Cicero, it's called, trounced humans at a game called Diplomacy without revealing its true identity. Cicero doubled the average score of human players across 40 online games and ranked in the top 10 of players who played more than one game. And for the first time, it says researchers at Meta believe their new Cicero AI may have something to say. For the first time, according to a new study, researchers trained an AI to attain human, quote unquote, human level performance in the war strategy board game Diplomacy. The new AI agent, named after the classical statesman and scholar who witnessed the fall of the Roman Republic, was able to effectively communicate and strategize with other human players, plan best methods for victory, and in some cases even pass as human. Now the researchers say Cicero, which accomplished its tasks by combining dialogue and strategic reasoning models, stands as a benchmark for multitask AI agent learning. Okay, so that's so it's at least 50 times smarter than the average employee at the Department of Motor Vehicles, or the crazy old people selling you tickets at the bus station. So how the progress on this is impressive. The pace of progress is happening, and it is not going to be too much longer before it's obviously these agents are going to be preferable to talking to humans when you call in for customer service at your bank or your telecom operator or what have you, uh, and and calling nearly anybody, your dentist office, for example, and booking an appointment, or a hotel and booking a room. So what do we do when the answering machine is more intelligent than the human you could pay for the same price? And by the way, that price would be I don't know, $200 a month. Can you get a human for $200 a month that can have better than human capabilities in these types of strategic problem solving challenges? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to be able to find two. You might be able to find them in Romania, where they make about $500 a month, and that's about as good as you will find for kind of strong English skills, strong reasoning skills. You're not going to find much cheaper than that, and something tells me that these bots are going to sell for a lot less than $500 a month and work 24/7, 365. Watch out. it's gonna be a bumpy ride because we got the robots and we got the agents, and now we go to the tweets. Did anybody have a tweet since we met last time?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment about the Cicero bot. I think that's a really interesting example of something that even a corporation could do, depending on how you set up the game. So I wonder how much time before states, like countries, begin implementing this. Supposedly, China already implements such a system in their foreign diplomacy, and one could argue it's not necessarily going so well for them. But yeah, that's. I think that's probably the coolest story because we had bots that can make bots. Now we have bots that can navigate diplomacy. I expect the next set of bots will probably be legislative or legal in that sense. So I wonder how long that's going to take.
Hey
I
Tyler, can
can't
I?
wait for the legal bots. I totally can't wait.
Me too. I'm all for it.
Hey Tyler, can I circle back
Yes.
to a prior topic? I wanted to add something that I got an incoming call and I couldn't do.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's on the Russia-Ukrainian issue, and the word I want to challenge is preemptive um, cyber uh, uh, consultation between the U.S. and Ukraine. I would suggest it's not preemptive. And for anyone who hasn't read the Wired article on the NotPetya virus that Russia released on Ukraine, um, that was targeting financial systems in the corporate world of Ukraine, with great negative impact on Ukraine. One of the unintended consequences is, I think it was unintended, it spilled over to Maersk, Maersk, the global shipping company, and it took global shipping down for about a week.
Yeah,
And
John,
cost
you're talking about the NotPetya virus, and it was targeted at a financial in Ukraine, like, but they
that's exactly
did it
what I
got
was
in the
saying.
wild.
Yeah, that,
It got out in the
let
wild.
me
And
just finish if I could. Let me just finish. Um, and so that article is just a page turner drama of how it all played out. That is just, if you haven't read it, it's a must read. And what it showed is that Russia had already inflicted great harm in the financial systems of Ukraine with a spillover into global supply chain commerce. And so the US had good reason to respond to that as opposed to being preemptive. In the context of the current conflict in Ukraine, it could have been considered preemptive, but actually it was a tailwind from the NotPetya escapade of Russia. So I strongly encourage people to read that article in Wired magazine. It is astonishing in so many ways, that reveal the global cyber security and cyber warfare that we are already in, not walking into, but the only people who don't believe it are those who don't understand how much of it is already well underway.
I've been on top.
100%, John. So that to just put another nail on that one, 100%. And it's the internet is generally worldwide. So when this stuff is released, even if they try to geolocate it and confine it to certain countries, it gets out. And so they're expecting a lot of this to happen with this conflict, obviously. And it didn't only take down Maersk, who had to go back to I think they went down to, because it's shipping, they're so antiquated. They had I think they had one server that was offline, but they were able to move.
It was in Lagos,
Yeah, that one. That was
and
under. It was
yeah,
under
and it was
off
only
their
because that
systems.
server was offline. Their master files. What happened is they
Yeah,
lost
well,
all their
let me
master
add. I'm going to
files.
add one more example, John. Then I'm going to let you go on
Yeah,
it because you read the article. But there's also they took down the pharma company. They just got the like $1 billion settlement. That was from NotPetya.
yeah.
So yeah, this stuff gets out there and it's massive.
The parallels between digital viruses and biologic viruses are extraordinary. And as you say, you can't contain. That's why biologic warfare is such a stupid idea, because the only way you could address it would be to engineer a virus, engineer a vaccine, ensure that the virus is incapable of mutating past your vaccine, and then vaccinating your whole population and then releasing the virus. The number of conditional events that must occur for that to succeed are extraordinary. And we see that exact same thing in this NotPetya Myers event. And so one would think that people intelligent enough to engineer viruses would understand that the expectation that a low mutation virus would stay that way, whether in the digital or in the biologic world, that naivete is a very, very dangerous naivete, both in the management of biologic pandemics as well as in managing cybersecurity and cyber warfare.
Okay, now we go to the tweets. BB found one from South China Morning Post that I'm retweeting, as we do with all the tweets, that China's, and these, it's pinned to the top of the room, so you can see all of the tweets that we're retweeting in real time. China's crypto fans make up 8% of FTX's customers, defying Beijing, and this 8% was even more than the users of Hong Kong, where FTX was based, interestingly. Another from BB via Nikkei Japan. The Japan contractor uses 3D printing to build curved wall structures, so that you can have a look at this new 3D printed curved wall style of housing development, for lack of a better word. It looks incredibly cool. And a device generates electrical fields to keep sharks away from fish hooks. So it's a handy little gadget that you put on your fish hook, so that when you catch the fish, the shark doesn't eat your fish. And large parts of Europe are warming twice as fast as the planet on average. The warming during the summer months in Europe has been much faster than the global average, according to a new study that I just retweeted. And bacteria can travel thousands of kilometers on airborne dust. When winds lift dust off the ground, attached bacteria go along for the ride. These airborne bacteria make up aerobiomes. And that's how you get bacteria moving around the planet. And onto islands. Study challenges WHO guidelines on pregnancy interval. Okay, I just retweeted that. And then Phil found one, the race to save Sam Bankman-Fried's other crypto exchange, which I wasn't aware of, called Serum. Scientists convert waste paper into battery parts for smartphones, from Singapore. That sounds very cool. EU hopes to build aligned guidelines on AI with the US. Let's hope so. Jaguar Land Rover starts recruitment drive for skilled tech sector jobs. Google plans to sack 10,000 employees after performance review. We covered that one. And what else? Drone trial to help sea swimmers in trouble. So now you've got a drone that will, if somebody's drowning in the ocean, it can fly a life preserver, essentially, a floating device, a lightweight floating device, styrofoam, basically, to the person far faster than a human could get there, by swimming or by conventional means. That's brilliant. Absolutely. That would work. Why aren't lifeguards doing exactly that? Flying swimming assistant devices out to the drowning people in seconds rather than minutes. And Amazon Alexa colossal failure. Sauda Mini found that one. That was a top story yesterday. Amazon iPhone 14 harder to find, according to Best Buy. Well, that might have something to do with the COVID lockdowns and the protesting team members. Mark Zuckerberg will not resign in 2023. And that headline is a counter to the headline we read yesterday, implying that they had sources that he was going to do exactly that. But now Facebook's denying it. And Elon Musk announces holding off relaunch of Twitter's verification, which is called Twitter Blue, until he feels that it's ready. And Yeah, we covered that. We covered WhatsApp desktop call history tab spotted in testing on Windows. Foxconn factory workers protest at iPhone plant. We covered that. Danish scientists concoct a fat-free whipped cream out of lactic acid bacteria. Okay. The US FBI joins Continental cyber attack investigation. I guess the FBI was invited by German authorities to join a cyber attack investigation on automotive supplier Continental. And Katerina found one that the deprivation in childhood linked to impulsive behavior in adulthood. Findings reveal a link between childhood deprivation and impulsivity and addiction later in life. And that begs the question, what is childhood deprivation? Deprived of what? I'm assuming mama's love.
Yes.
What is the deprivation they're referring to? Children who have experienced deprivation, maybe sensory deprivation, lack of affection, I'm guessing, are more likely to make more impulsive choices than those who don't and can lead to addictions later in life. Trait impulsivity, the preference for immediate gratification, has been linked to spending more on food, especially unhealthy, high caloric food. Studies have shown that children who experience poverty and food insecurity tend to have higher body mass index as adults than those who do not. Oh, so now we know deprivation means calorie deprivation or economic food insecurity, it says. Poverty and food insecurity. Researchers from the School of Psychology at Aston University find a link between deprivation in childhood and impulsive behavior, leading to addictions later in life. Give me a quote. What do you mean by deprivation?
Don't have enough to eat?
Children were given a choice between taking home a small amount of money, for example, $1, or getting $10 a week, or even more a year later. How long a person is willing to wait for the larger amount of money can be used to calculate a discount rate that shows how much the waiting time reduces the value of money. An impulsive person might prefer $1 now because the value of $10 in 6 months is discounted to less than $1 right now. A less impulsive person might be willing to wait 6 months for $10, but not wait for a whole year for 15. Okay. These findings are concerning because impulsivity doesn't just predict obesity. These findings tell us a lot about why people living in poorer areas tend to be unhealthier than people living in wealthier areas. People who experience deprivation as children are more likely to choose to do things that, although they might be pleasurable in the short term, are unhealthy in the long term. This includes overeating, taking drugs, cigarettes, gambling, etc. We know, too, that impulsivity can help to explain why some people go on to become addicts while other people can avoid some of the more harmful effects of drugs and alcohol. Deprivation is one of the many factors that can lead to impulsive behavior throughout a person's lifetime. Okay.
I think it's overgeneralized.
Yeah. Well, if the addiction and the impulsivity is a positive impulsivity of sorts, the type where you have these incredible overachievers who direct their impulsivity towards more positive style of outcomes, and which you could even say some people are addicted to weightlifting or bodybuilding or company building or rocket launching or whatever, that you have these unsatiable overachievers who might also be the other side of that same coin. They become addicted and impulsive towards more positive outcomes.
Even, I mean, the addiction to tech news.
Well, I wasn't on here last week, now was I?
And then this week he started 1 hour early.
I accidentally, yeah. Ken found one from the Wall Street Journal. Video game companies brace for lackluster holiday season. The industry could post its first annual sales decline in at least a decade. Is there Ken, did you read that? Did
The reason?
There's nothing to read. I wasn't talking to you, Siri. I was talking to Ken.
Ken is not there.
Waymo, which is Google's autonomous taxi company, shows off its next truly driverless prototype car with 4 sliding doors and no controls. So retweeting that so you can see that. And I think that covers all of the headlines because now the tweets are getting quite repetitious. Yeah, from what we've read already. So there we go. We will do it again tomorrow.
Tyler?
And yes.
Yep, Ken.
There was just
Yes.
news I guess last night. I'm not too sure if you touched on it already today, but Neuralink, the old president, he's went and started his own company. He's got 160 million in total funding, and it looks like photonics through the eye, and it's non-invasive technology, so no holes drilled through the skull.
Hmm.
And if I could make a quick comment about the Waymo tweet, um, it's a fundamental design principle that in situations and use cases that have potentially critical impacts of unanticipated digital failures, there always needs to be a human override. And if it's as simple as a stop button or a pull over safely ASAP button, if those don't exist in those cars, I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole, because you just need a few incidents with a runaway accelerator or whatever, which happens in internal combustion engines and in manual driving cars. It's going to happen in automated cars, and to the extent that there isn't some form of human override, um, I think it's a profound violation of a general principle of design.
Hey, can I just ask a quick question? Did we talk about Apple and the self-driving cars? Because I saw a product attorney listing for Apple in their quote special projects group, and it was extremely sparse. But it said you had to have regulatory affairs experience, including for autonomous driving. Crickets.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
I
but
think
Norma,
that's very much on point to what I was saying. If the designers themselves do not deploy classical manual override mechanisms for unanticipated, unexpected failures, there is a role for regulation there. I think that was spot on.
Okay. Ben starting a room at the top of the hour, I hear. So 20
Yes,
minutes?
in 20
Okay.
minutes. So